The senator from Kentucky is recognized.
We are rapidly approaching a milestone in our country, and it's not a good one. We're rapidly approaching $30 trillion in debt. We're accumulating debt like we never have at any time in our history. We're actually accumulating debt at the rate of over $2 million per minute. Now, some say deficits don't matter. Some on the left say they have this new monetary theory. We can just print it all up. You can all have free stuff. There'll be manna from heaven, and nothing could go wrong. We're just going to give you money. If not $1,400 checks a month or a year, why don't we give you monthly checks? And that's part of the new plans. The new plans of the $3.5 trillion that we're facing down at this point, that'll all be borrowed, is to give people free money, to give people free this, free that. But I think people are smarter than that. I think people know that ultimately you don't get anything in life without hard work. You don't get anything in life really for free. Isn't there some kind of ramification to so much borrowed money? When someone comes to you and says, or they call you on the phone and they say, here's $1,000, all you got to do is sign up for this. Most people immediately recoil and they say, well, that might be a scam. Somebody's going to be ripping me off to say that. Well, it's sort of the bait and switch of the politics we face now. People are saying, we're going to give you free college, free cars, free cell phones, free this, free that. Everything in life will be free. You won't have to work anymore. The problem is there are ramifications. Money doesn't grow on trees. The money's got to come from somewhere. So either we borrow it, we become more indebted to foreign countries, we tax people for it, or ultimately the way we fix a lot of our deficit problems is we simply print the money. And so when the Federal Reserve prints the money, as we increase the money supply, the money that we have becomes worth less and less. It loses its purchasing power. This is the insidious tax of inflation. And the interesting thing about it is inflation is a regressive tax. It doesn't affect everyone the same. In fact, the tax of inflation actually affects the working class, the people of lower incomes, and those on fixed incomes and pension, retirees. It affects them much worse because they don't have the ability for their income to go up. So right now we're facing 5% inflation because of the massive borrowing that really both parties instituted in the last year. They decided that the result to the pandemic would be to close everything down, destroy the economy, and then give everyone free money. And to a large extent, both parties actually did this last year. Now this year, the decision has been made by Republicans to say, whew, this is so much, we got to stop. We got to get people back to work and let the economy recover. So it's primarily been Democrats this year. But both parties have a certain responsibility to this, at least some members of both parties. But as the inflation occurs, and this effect is being transmitted to the economy, you find that those who suffer are those who cannot raise their income, those who have fixed income or low income. One of the things you see here is that if we have 5% inflation, what does that mean? You say, well, I don't know, it means I lose my purchasing power by 5% next year. But what if it happens year in, year out for a decade and you've lost 50% of your purchasing power? It means to make up for that you really have to have a 50% increase in your wages. So will wages keep up with inflation? The dirty little secret is that in some ways, wages will rise, but maybe they rise an equivalent amount or a little bit less, and you say a decade later, I'm not any better off. And there become people mired and more dependent on government as government gets larger and larger, and they think they're getting free stuff, but it's not really free. The allure of something for nothing. This is the allure of socialism. This is a false allure. It's something that you're going to be able to get something and you're not going to have to pay for it. So we've accumulated $30 trillion in debt. Interest payments have been fairly low over the past decade or so. Interest payments are about, 1, 2, 2.5%. But now interest rates are rising. Even at the low interest rates, our interest rate that we pay each year has grown to about $300 billion a year. So $300 billion a year, and people say, well, there's a debt ceiling. If the debt ceiling doesn't come up, we'll default, and Wall Street will become hysterical, and there'll be a collapse of the stock market. Well, there doesn't need to be. Nobody really is for spreading discalm or spreading, chaos among the marketplace. We all want the marketplace to be calm. How could we calm the marketplace? What we would say to the marketplace is, we'll pay our bills. We're not going to default on our currency. And the way you can pay for your bills is pay for it with income. We bring in $3.8 trillion a year in tax revenue. The interest payment is $300 billion. It's less than we bring in 1 month. So the annual payment on interest is less than what we bring in tax revenue in 1 month. Why can't we pay the interest? Why would we ever not pay the interest on our debt? Why? Because we're overdrawn and because all the rest of the spending is crowded out by the interest. We've got plenty of money to pay for the interest. We just don't have enough left to pay for the cocaine studies with Japanese quail. That's about $1 million. You say, it's only $1 million. Well, they studied Japanese quail to see whether or not Japanese quail on cocaine, to see if they're more sexually promiscuous. How did we get to a $30 trillion debt? Because there's studies like that littered throughout the budget. In fact, the group that does these studies, the National Science Foundation, we just increased their budget by 2/3. Mostly Democrats, but once again, many of the big government Republicans voted for this too. So we've exploded the National Science Foundation. Now, was there any warning that the National Science Foundation was one of the most wasteful parts of our government? Well, yeah, since 1972, there was a senator at the time named William Proxmire. He was a conservative or maverick Democrat from the Midwest, and he started an award. He called it the Golden Fleece Award. And the first award he gave was for a study from the National Science Foundation. It was over a study that was $50,000. That was when $50,000 was a lot of money. And the study was to see what makes people happy. Really? And people were aghast that we were spending $50,000 on it. And he complained. He gave him a booby prize, an award, the Golden Fleece Award. And lo and behold, we're still doing it. This same organization last year did a $1.5 million study that if you take a selfie of yourself while smiling and then look at the selfie later on, does it make you happy? That cost $1.5 million. Why do people like each other? Why do people fall in love? These aren't studies for taxpayer dollars, but these are small ticket items. They say, oh, you can never balance the budget on that. Well, what about $70 million spent on a hotel in Kabul that the contractor ran off with the money and it was never built? What about a $48 million gas station, no, strike that, natural gas station in a remote area of Afghanistan? Well, very few, if anybody in the United States has a car that runs on natural gas. Why was the U.S. government building a natural gas station in Afghanistan? Because we've gone woke on the green climate. We are for the green climate. We got to combat climate change and reduce the carbon footprint of Afghanistan. Really? I thought the military was supposed to kill the enemies, defend the country. But we're reducing the carbon footprint in Afghanistan. Somebody put up, I think it was Rod Dreyer, put up this the other day. It was a little video clip, and it was tragic, but somewhat hilarious in its tragicness. He said, this is when we lost the Afghan war. And it had a picture of a urinal. I think it was Marcel Duchamp, was some Dadaist artist back in like 1917, and I guess he thought it would be really hilarious to put a male urinal in a museum and call it art. And I don't know if it was really art or if it was a joke, but the thing is we're having these Afghan men and women in robes and veils and everything studying Dadaist art, a male urinal, and asking them what they thought of this. And you could see a couple of the women just going and just sort of shaking their head with utter incomprehension. But when we're spending money sending PhDs over to Afghanistan to teach Dadaist art about that a male urinal is somehow art, I think that's why some of them think that we're actually the culture that's in decay, not them. But the thing is we are spending money right and left. The right spends it on military adventure, the left spends it on welfare, and the compromise that always happens around here is right comes together with left, and they all agree to, well, we might as well just spend it on both. So everything goes up. The military budget went up. We already spend more than all of the countries, more than 10 countries combined is our military budget. $750 some odd billion. Republicans and Democrats just raised it $25 billion more. In the midst of ending a war, where's the peace dividend? What happened? We ended a war. I thought we'd have a little more money left over. So today I tried to take $6 billion that's supposed to go to the Afghan Reconstruction Fund, to the old Afghan government. There is no Afghan government. They've been overrun by the Taliban. I want to have, and I would love for Americans that are watching this, call me today at my office and tell me why the Taliban should get money. But I ask that we take that money away, put it back in the Treasury, spend some of it on the Iron Dome for Israel, and it was objected to by the Democrats because, by golly, they'll spend money, but they don't want to offset it with any spending cuts. Well, really? We should have $0 being sent to any government in Afghanistan. I asked Secretary Blinken about this, and his response was, well, I can't guarantee it, and if they are meeting expectations and they're acting and behaving properly, they might get this money. Really, I don't see a scenario or a world under which U.S. taxpayer dollars would be going to the Taliban.